Hey guys, Ela here. Happy Christmas Eve. Eve? Is that a thing? Nah, it should be. Anyways, here for a review of The Housemaid, which is a 2025 American thriller film directed by Paul Feig and stars Sydney Sweeney, Amanda Seyfried, and Brandon Sklenar. And it's based on the 2022 novel of the same name by Freda McFadden. So the plot follows a young woman with a rough past trying to get back on her feet and accepting a job as a live-in housemaid with a family hiding some troubling secrets. So 2025 has been an interesting year for our girl Sydney Sweeney, I think you could say. She had four back-to-back flops. I mean, some of them being historic flops. And a jeans commercial that, probably just shouldn't have been made. And The Housemaid is maybe looking to be what breaks that rut. I'm actually surprised that this movie hasn't been a bigger draw. Last I checked, I think I'm still waiting for the numbers to catch up from over the weekend. But last I checked, they hadn't broke even yet. They hadn't broke even with the budget yet. I think they will for sure. But I don't know. I thought this would be a bigger movie. Movies like this are not really my cup of tea personally, but this one seems like something that could have like mass appeal, like in the 90s or even like the early 2000s. I think this movie would have been massive, would have slid right in with a lot of what was coming out around that time. And I say that because it really does remind me of a lot of thrillers from that era, familiar formula, I guess you could say, but with twists and turns, and enough of its own thing to make this its own thing. I mean, when I was watching this, just off the top of my head, stuff like Fear or The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, came to mind pretty much instantly. And you might, if you've seen this, you might have your own, comparisons that you might be drawing or whatever. So I went into this with really nothing better to do. I just had nothing better to do. Didn't really want to watch this movie. I expected to be underwhelmed or just actively hate this, and I'm surprised to report that, it ain't too bad. I've always had mixed opinions when it comes to Sydney Sweeney. For me, she has this way of coming across as like completely uninteresting, as far as her performances go. But she has this way of like throwing a fucking Hail Mary and somehow pulls through, especially, when she's under pressure. Like, just watch Immaculate to see what I mean by that. Amanda Seyfried is a name I remember from like the early 2000s, but I'm not sure I ever saw any of her films or anything. My girlfriend said that she was pretty much the Sydney Sweeney of that era, so I'll just roll with that. I like it. And my only experience with Brandon Sklenar was via the Blumhouse thriller Drop from earlier this year, which I thought was fine. He's a solid actor, and he definitely has that like Chris Hemsworth charm and good looks thing going on, and I think he would have been a megastar in the 90s, of course. That said, I've seen him in 2 movies just this year, so I'd say he's doing pretty well. Okay, so I hate reviewing these like twisty, turny movies. I just get super paranoid because it's hard to find, for me anyways, hard to find that balance between like no spoilers and not saying enough and just cranking out a fucking boring review. I guess for me, I guess you could say it's a very fine line, and it's elusive. So my girlfriend and I had seen the trailer for this a handful of times, and I really liked how it looks like a film with the villain, but it's hard to tell who it is. Having seen this, it would have been a fucking shame if they just spoiled this in the trailer. Can you imagine that, though? Can you imagine that, a modern mainstream trailer that doesn't spoil important plot points? That said, it probably did, but not the most important one, I guess. So yeah, good job, guys. So Sydney Sweeney is our lead here, and she plays Millie, a girl with a trouble past, like I said, and is now trying her hardest to overcome that and hopefully live a normal life. I mean, she's things are going pretty bad for her. She's homeless, living in her car. She's struggling to find a job. And while I'd love to blame that on our current bullshit economic situation, I can't. So she fakes a resume out of desperation and ends up finding the job that would actually solve most of her problems. A live-in housemaid. It's for a super rich family in a massive, fancy house, and everyone seems really nice. But things also seemed, just maybe a little bit off. So Nina, played by Amanda Seyfried, seems nice, albeit a little stressed and scatterbrained, but what can you do? Andrew, played by Brandon Sklenar, seems surprised, like he didn't even know that, Nina would be hiring somebody. Their daughter Cecilia seems to not want anything to do with Millie at all. One thing that threw me off at first was, the fact that this movie moves really quick, and the story isn't afraid to kind of zigzag a little bit. And those things are actually very important elements at play with this script, because it gives the film this kind of like fun, sporadic vibe, and really gives a very unoriginal story a feel of its own. So that not intentional at all, but it worked, and I thought that was kind of cool. Everything is just, it's just amped up, but never quite feels stupid or ridiculous. Especially everyone and everything around Millie, especially after she gets her new job. And speaking of which, literally day one is where Nina flips the script and just completely goes off the deep end, and treats Millie like complete utter shit, which is not at all how she acted during the interview. I mean, she's abusive, I would say even sadistic, and it's confusing as, to why she's just suddenly acting this way at first. Andrew actually defends Millie, every chance that he can, but he isn't always around to help. And of course, Millie wants to leave, but, if she loses this job, she's homeless again, and actually much, much worse than that. So I'm giving The Housemaid a 2 out of 4 stars, and a solid recommendation for anyone who's in the mood for just a solid, fun thriller, fast-paced. I might not be a massive thriller guy myself, but I've seen a few this year. I think I've seen like 3 or 4, and I think this one is actually my favorite. The acting solid across the board, especially with Sweeney, and I liked Millie as a character. I liked her a lot. The movie looks good, and I suppose you could call it an erotic thriller, actually, kind of like with Honey Don't. I really didn't expect all the nudity and stuff, but it kind of adds to the film's tone, or at least just makes sense. The story itself, is actually a lot of fun, but it does have its flaws. I liked the more important plot points, but I didn't always agree with how they were written or how they got there. Some of it seemed almost kind of lazy to me, but I get it. It's a simple and easy, to follow story with a lot of seasoning, a lot of flavors going on, and I did pick out some underlying themes, mostly narcissism, abuse, and how rich people look down on fucking everybody who isn't like them, which is a theme that we will be seeing a lot more in the near future, and we already have been seeing, and for a good reason. Cheers, guys, and I'll see you at the multiplex.
Subscribe right now, please.